Good morning and welcome to today's seminar. Today we'll be talking about the new Docker setup that I've created for providing ApiOpenStudio and admin on a single server, so using Trafik's awesome Reverse-Proxy, and also that can be used for your local setup. So that means it's quicker, it's faster, and it's simpler. Although Trafik is more complex than the existing version using JBuilder's Nginx Reverse-Proxy, Trafik is a little bit more complex, to be honest, especially version 2, and they've got a version 3 coming up, which I'll do as soon as that's reached full production ready. It looks like they're just getting towards the end of beta right now. But basically what it means is you can set up admin and API on a single server, which is ideal for probably small to medium instances. Once you start getting bigger, you're going to want to decouple the admin and the API and put them onto separate servers, and also then for local if you're just going to do development. The existing one that we have, the ApiOpenStudio Docker Dev with the Reverse-Proxy, that uses a volume mount which requires you to do git clones, which means it's a little bit slower than using the pure new Docker images that we have. So cool, let us begin. Let's crack on with that one. Also, I should say sorry about the delay last week. I was going to do it last Friday, but I had to delay because I found a problem in the production. I'll come to the reasons, the problem that I found as soon as I come through to that in the code. It was in the config and in the mounting and stuff and permissions, but it was basically causing an issue in production. But I'll go into full details about that when we get to that. So, without ado, let us take a look at here. So, this is all available on GitHub and GitLab. The GitHub is a straight fork. It's just a mirror of the GitLab version where all the production is done. This is read-only, but it's exactly the same. So you can either fork it, create your, and then work on your own, because to be honest, it's fairly base. We'll talk a little bit further. Or if you want to suggest any stuff that you want to do here and work on any bugs that are found, then this is where you do it. You do it in GitLab. It's on the MIT license, so it's free for anybody to use. We've got all information here, and also in the wiki, which I'll come to. The wiki is a little bit more detailed. So, right, I'm just going to take a quick look in here. Let's go to the files, and we'll have a quick look at the Docker Compose. So we've got 4 images we're using. We've got Trafik, which is the Trafik container. That sits in the front, which then links up to 2 ones at the back behind it, which is the API and the admin. There you've got the labels here, which Trafik uses to define what it is. The name of the host is all defined in the environment variables. We'll come to that. We've got the database that's connected to the API, and that is basically it. These are all running under port 80, and then we've got port 443 and 80 for the Trafik. So Trafik connects with these endpoints over port 80 because it's just easier, to be honest. It really doesn't matter because it's behind the proxy. So this is the image that I've first pulled up. This is the Trafik image. This is the default one. If we look at the tags, you'll see that if I go to the version 3, we're still in beta. We've got a beta 2, and we've got a version 3 that was published at the same time as the beta 2, so I'm a little bit wary of it, but also because if you look at the overview, they're actually only giving examples up to v2, so you can see how new the v3 is. And then there's the v1, A lot of people complain that V2 was a lot more complex than the V1, and by gosh it was. I had quite a nightmare with this trying to set it up, but we'll get to that. This has a link at the bottom to the to all the documentation, V2, which is this one. So we've got full documentation here. You can, if you need to go into it, you can. They've got the open source version as well as the paid for version, where you start to, when we start to get into the enterprise, and you get a much bigger administration area, which is something I wanted to quick talk about as well. You'll notice we've also, as in the Trafic, we've also, on top of port 80 and 443, we've also got 8080, which is the admin interface. For local production, that is absolutely fine. For production, you can put that behind a HD password with extra commands in there. This I didn't do, and you'll probably extend this or remove it, but the main general gist of it is you can view all of your routers, your services, middlewares that exist within the Trafic. These are Trafic phrases, but essentially it's where you've got the different services like the API that we set up and the 443 ports, so you can start going into there. It's not going to be open on this demo that I'm setting up on AWS because I've not opened up port 8080, but if you do it on your local, you'll be able to see it. So what else do we have? We also have the ApiOpenStudio Docker, which you already know about, and the ApiOpenStudio admin Docker. And then in home, if we go to install Docker production, nope, we go to Docker, there we go, ApiOpenStudio core and admin Reverse-Proxy. This is the one here, so we've got a bit more detail in here, and we can actually start jumping in and working on this. Right, so let's go to open up a terminal. I've actually got the repo open here, which is set up for my local. I might go through this in a little bit, maybe just an addendum, but let's log into, here's demo. So this is a server I've already set up. This is a bare bones Ubuntu server. The only thing I've installed on this is MakeCert, because I'm not going to bother with certbot. I'm just going to do a local certificate. That'll be fine for this demo, and I'm certainly not going to buy a specific certification for this, but this will be absolutely fine. I've also set up the Docker packages as well. So we've got Docker, MakeCert, and Git, and also Vim, because I love Vim. Right, so I've also obviously set up SSH, so I can clone this. Let me just make sure I don't have legacy stuff, and I still do. Just in case, you know what? I'm going to move that one that did work, having learned from the last presentation. I'm actually going to keep a copy of this, just in case this one that I've just done doesn't work. Right, there we go. And I'm also going to get rid of those settings, which I also did a backup of. .env. Yep, that's everything. Yep, okay. Oops. Yes. How would you Adam and Eve it? Okay, one sec. I need to set up my SSH keys in. Oh no, hang on. Hang on. I know I did this, so let me just. I'm going to clone from. From the. I'm going to clone from the GitLab. Because I swear I did this. Yes, I did. I thought so. Actually, I'm going to leave that in for us as well. Oh, that's why. It's because yes, I've got them both in there because I thought of that. Right, so let's go into here. Now you see we've got the basic one here with the example configs and the setups that we need, plus the docker compose.yaml. So first of all, I've already done install make cert. I'm already in there, so I'm actually going to copy that and make some slight changes. I'm going to create the certificate. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave the certificates and keys as localhost.key. Doesn't really matter. My main rationale being that we've actually got in the dynamic, we're actually calling it localhost local CRT, and that is how it is by default when you copy it. So when you clone it. So I'm just going to leave it as is for now, so I don't need to edit it. But we will need to change that anyway. So there we go. So blah blah blah. That should now work. Yep. And we'll also copy in the root cert. Maybe not required, but I'm going to do it anyway just for completeness. We don't need to. Let me just move that out of the way. So this is actually for local environment, which is where you obviously then need to change your etc host file to point to the right domain, but we don't need to do that in this case because it's going to go through to demo.ApiOpenStudio.com, which I've already set the DNS for to point to this IP. If you bought your own certificate and you install it on your server, you can then add that to your .env file, which if I go into actually we'll come to that because I haven't done that. But no, actually I could do it. Example.env. We'll be copying that over, so there you can see we can set the directory certificates where you're storing it locally. As it comes out of the box, it points to ./certs, which is obviously that certificate directory, the certs directory here, where we are from the local instance. So you would also then need to, well, actually, I do need to do this because I'm in a production version. I need to update the dynamic config. This is what's used. So let me step back. This is the Trafic configuration. So if I go into config, you see we've got the admin config, the API config, dynamic conf, and so the admin and the API confs are purely for Nginx that exists within. I've had to do a slight override on them so that the existing ones that we have force it to 443. They redirect port 80 to port 443. That we don't want to do in this case, so I've had to create specific Nginx config files, vhost config files, for each of these ones to keep them on port 80, which is cool. But we've got, if I look in static, this is the main config file for Trafic. The one that we're really interested here is the file name, the file etc trafic dynamic.yaml. So that allows us dynamic configuration of certificates and domains. So if then that's mounted in a specific Docker account, in a specific directory. So if we look at the Trafig in the Docker Compose, you'll see that we're mounting the dynamic and the static into the etc Trafic directories. This is what Trafic will use specifically. So it will read Trafic first, and then it will look for the dynamic.yaml file, which will then let us actually not want to go in because I need to edit this, which allows us to update this. So you can see I'm actually saying what we need to update here to point to the correct domains, which is HTTP, routers, Trafic, TLS, domains, and then the main and sans. So we're going to change these to ApiOpenStudio.com, and this tells Trafic now what to look for to forward to the different domains. Right, and we don't need to update the certs files because we've already got them pointing to the correct names, localhost.crt and localhost.key. Let's save that. Now for the configuration, which I kind of stepped past a little bit when I was looking at the example file, but we'll copy example.env to .env. We'll copy the admin settings as well. Now we'll update the permissions, make sure these are limited as much as possible. Now, this is the little gotcha that got me last week. If I open up the Docker Compose again, you'll see in the API, and I think it's also in the admin, instead of doing it by read only, I'm setting it to open, just the standard default, because the problem that we have with Docker is that because it can. Sorry, the problem that we have with the Dockers and the fact that they have their own Nginx engine within there is that the PHP requires the user and group --data. By default, that user doesn't exist. Now, I had the situation of works on my machine and also works on the single servers because I had the override on the install, and when it creates it, it sets up the data in there. But what's actually happening here is that you require a user of ID 33, which is --data, on your local, because you're mounting it in there, and it then gets inherited by either the ID if you specify it, or the ID of the name internally of the name that you're using on the host, if that makes sense. But the point is that on a bare bones Ubuntu, if I do info UID 33, hang on, that's not the right command. What was the command to bash find ID for username? Ah, that's right. ID minus U 33. Now that's actually a bit of a surprise. I didn't think that was going to happen, but it may be because I actually created it. But the point was, by default, that user does not exist. So it ends up, when it gets mounted inside Docker, it gets mounted as root, the owner as root, not just the group. So that then means that PHP or Nginx can't read it. Oh damn, I hear you ask. Exactly. So what we're doing here, we're changing the group. We're going to leave it mounted as it'll get mounted as belonging to root, but its group will be 33, and that on Mac, I think that's the App Store, because I had a quick check on that. Let me have a quick look. ID minus U 33. Yeah. Okay, so there is no user 430, but what we'll do, we'll change the group to 33 for the settings. Now if we do edit my vault, you'll see that's now set to data. For some reason I'm seeing it may be because I played with it earlier, but there are certain cases where that user or group will not exist. So on particular installations, so this is a way of getting around that. It's not ideal, but it's probably the best that I could do. I'm going to see if I can find a much more elegant solution, but for now, this is how we can get around that. Right, so I'm not going to bother changing the DB username password. This is just a demo, doesn't matter. API URL is going to be change the admin URL. Now what I've also done is that what I have done is allowed us to define Traefik image tags, API image tags and the admin image tags. If we have a quick look in here, you'll see that it's put in the Docker Compose. You can see that it's pulling out from the .env the different values there. So if we now have a quick shufti into the Traefik, I've got 2.9 there. If we go into and we have a quick look at the tags, we can change to whatever we want. If I go to 2 point, you'll see that the most recent version 2 is 2.9. So that's fine, we can stick with that one. That's actually the 2.9, but there is also a 2.9, so I'll be using that one. There was another little gotcha that I had. I didn't bother updating this because I thought to myself, oh, you know what? Whoever installs it can put whatever tag they want in there. They can go and check. But I found that although it was on beta 3 because I hadn't updated it, and it got me. So, and I ended up with an older version and it didn't work. So that's the most recent tag, beta 4. Could have used master or develop, they're both the same, but we'll use beta 4. And the Nala 89 tag, sorry, the admin tag is beta. So we will leave those as well. Let's go back to the docs. That's everything done in there. We're happy? Yes, we are. Ooh. I just thought of something. Give me 1 second. I'm going to do that quickly now, just in case. Because I was only thinking about the hosting. I may not have done the DNS for the API and the admin, which is going to be a gotcha. Just going to set this quickly. Just have a quick check. You're right. Well, I'm right. I haven't. So I'm going to set that now so that I'll give the DNS a chance to propagate. Because I was looking at those IPs and thinking, really? Is that what I did? Sure I didn't. Right, so let's go back into the .env. And actually what it was that. Whoops! Sneaky! I'm just going to have a quick check on the make cert that I did. Yeah, that's fine. So it was stardot. Cool. All good. I'm also going to have a quick double check on the config that I did, because I wonder whether main sounds. Nope, that's fine. That one there is still traefik.docker.localhost. It's actually not important what that's called, but that is used in, if you want to edit that, that is in the Docker Compose, so you'll also see the rules where it's set. traffic, at least I thought there was. Well, I thought there was. I think I'm wrong, but never mind. Okay. Now let's go into the API settings. Now, I've made these a slightly different version of this because if we look in the logger, at the end of the day for the API, the only thing we need here is std out and then log files, which can be stored internally. So that means when you're running the Docker, it goes to the std out, which means when you do docker log ApiOpenStudio-API, that comes from that std out, so you're able to see it live, but you'll also then have a hard copy version which goes into the internal logs within the admin, so if you need to go in there, you can. Right, so the database I'm going to leave as is, if you remember, in .env, which will go into the ApiOpenStudio API config. That also needs to be defined here. I'm going to leave those the same. We're going to change the API URL. That is now API-demo wrong dot ApiOpenStudio.com. I'm actually going to copy that because I might want that. We also need to update the jotkeys, the jotkey issuer and permitted. Now, I've actually created a ticket to deprecate this issuer and permitted for because I've actually theorized that these are not required. I wanted to give it wiggle room so that potentially we could have a different issuer or permitted for, perhaps you had a wildcard in there, but really it's only ever going to be used for the same API URL, so it really doesn't make sense to have those extra ones in there. So I'm actually going to deprecate JWT issuer and permitted for. They're not required, but that'll be a little bit further on. Now let's have a look at the admin. So in this one, the only thing we need to change is the URL. Whoops. Oh, seriously. Sorry about that. The API URL, where it's calling the tag name, the container name, that doesn't need to change because that's going to sit behind the same Docker network. So we only need to refer to the API. We don't need to put in the API URL. And aside from that, nothing more to do. Now the moment of truth. Let's create the network. In Ubuntu we have to use sudo. Okay, I already created it. And before I do that, I want to make sure I haven't got any containers up and going. Nope. And there should not be any volumes either. Let's get rid of that. Dufo. It's the latest in Bash Tech. Meh. Okay. We will leave that up, I think, for now. My main rationale being that it's actually created by the Docker Compose, so I was going to show it with being up and down, but if it's already there, doesn't really matter. You don't have to create it. The only thing you need to do is manually create the network. And we're now up and going. First things first, let's set up the API. So we'll go into the container. Seriously? I always forget. So I'm so used to working on a Mac where I don't need to bother with it. Right, so now we're in. And you'll see that we've got nearly everything in there. The only thing we don't have is the file install and the composer dependencies. So if we run install, that would Yep, that will do. So yes. And we're not going to bother with those. We're going to add a new user, and we're going to create new jotkeys. Cool, kushti, lovely jubbly. Right, so let's jump out of that, and now we'll jump in and we'll do the admin. That's done. Can I just double check in the API, because I'm actually thinking to myself that the composer lock, and it is there. Let me just list, and okay, it's been done. Cool, all good. I didn't think that was installed. I didn't think it went in there, but it obviously did. Anywho, let's get out of there. And now we'll take a look. We'll do a quick test on here. So admin pass token we don't mind, so that's API demo, that's absolutely fine. So let's do a quick login. We're on demo, that's all good. Oh, hang on, sorry, auth. Let's fetch the token. Et voila! That is now working. So you can see we've got the base URL. The base URL is API-demo. So that's good. And if we now jump into admin, yes, and that's only because it's not a brilliant SSL certificate, but that's fine for the demo. And we can log in with that user I've just created, and we're there. So you can see how quick and easy it is there to set things up on the reverse proxy using the Trafic reverse proxy. So very happy with that. Now, that's kind of all I want to talk about at the moment. I'm going to be pushing out a new version of this, or a new branch for the version 3 of Trafic when that comes out, and very possibly find a more elegant way of solving the user permissions for the settings files. But I'll get those sorted out ASAP. Aside from that, I think that's all good. Now, do we have any questions that we'd like to ask? I guess not. People would have jumped in fairly quickly. Just a comment from F for Australia. Yes, this is faster. Definitely. Much faster than the original Docker dev. In fact, I had a developer reported that he had an issue with the JBuilder proxy with Podman. They don't work nicely together. So this should get over that one, I think. I've not tested it with Podman, but I'll be very interested to see what you've got. Now, there's one more question here. Is it true that ApiOpenStudio offers free support and training to digital agencies looking to onboard the system? Yes, this is quite true. We are, because we're in an early phase at the moment, the early adopters, definitely, any agencies or developers, we will give free support and training from myself, the founder. You will get several hours worth of training and potentially unlimited support until you're up and going. So yes, absolutely. Okay, I think we'll call it a day. Thank you very much and have an awesome day.